I don't think at this point it matters. Now it's about the dollar bills, y'all.
I also...
You're not allowed to ever say that again.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll say it all I want.
The dollar bills, y'all.
Yeah. Holla.
Hi, folks. This is Louis Herfin, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series Westworld. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Ash.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our Telegraph edition where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and respond to the top listener email and voicemail for the week. This week's episode was season 4, episode 7, Metanoia, and we had another record of entries this week, and they are all quality. It was very hard to narrow them down, but we did our best. So we're going to run through them as quickly as possible to give you as many viewpoints as we can. Again, if you don't hear your email here, it will appear on the website, shatpod.com/TV under the Telegraph section, and we'll do our best to respond there. Also, many of the emails have been shortened for time. So if you want to read them in their entirety, you can always go to shatpod.com/TV, go to the Telegraph section. You can see it there. If you have anything to say about this episode or any of our episodes, you can also leave us a voicemail like so many people did this week at shatpod.com/TV using the SpeakPipe feature. And this week's topics cover a range from the Sublime, the ending of the series, Maeve, Christina, the podcast itself, and many other topics. But let's get started with the most popular topic of the week, the Sublime.
So we're going to kick off tonight with an email from John G. entitled An Open Door for Teddy. And John writes in and says, "Hey, Shat Crew, my idea for why the Sublime is left open is that there are multiple reasons, some of which we won't know until the finale. One reason I think it's left open is what Big D said. This is the lifeboat for saving a small sliver of host and human life for the next world. Bernard showed us that Hale had perfected the human brain scan technology, so you don't need much. Just stand in front of this mirror for a few seconds and now you're completely copied. So humans are going to get uploaded to the Sublime, and maybe the technology has advanced to the point that it will look just like in season 2 with the host, and your brain will be read in a second as you pass through the door. The other reason I think the door to the Sublime was left open was for Teddy. I think everything we've seen of Christina from the first episode of the season to now takes place after Bernard opens that door. I think you leave the door open and Teddy finds his way out into whatever form Christina is. Since they're both hosts, if she is any kind of computer system, he can maybe project his image to her or transfer his code to wherever she is or whatever she is right now. Recall that 1 year in the real world is equivalent to 1,000 years in the Sublime. That's 2 years in the Sublime for every day, 40 days for every hour, 16 hours for every minute. So Bernard opens the door. By the time he and Maeve get back in the car, that's been at least 10 minutes. So if Teddy is in the Sublime, in just that amount of time, he's had nearly 7 days to see what's happening and start thinking of things he might like to do. Who knows how long he's had by the time Maeve and Bernard get back to the tower, since we still don't know for sure if it's really in New York and Bernard has to drive from Nevada to NYC, or if it's a park version of NYC and it's close by. Or maybe Teddy didn't even need time. Maybe he and Bernard thought of this together in the 30,000 years Bernard was in the Sublime. And that comes from John G.
John, this is brilliant. I mean, we've been asking this whole time, how did Teddy get here? Where did he come from? And it makes perfect sense that Bernard opening the Sublime needs a reason, and perhaps it was to release some host buddies. He said all along he can't do it alone. Maybe he's releasing them virtually or into, quote unquote, the system.
Well, thanks so much, John G. Up next, we have one from Susan in Central PA on pretty much the same topic. And Susan says, I would very much like to thank the person that figured out that Teddy was brought out of the Sublime by Bernard. I think I was hung up on the idea that Teddy would need a body to inhabit. But if he's in VR, problem solved, sort of. Teddy piggybacks in Bernard's head, like Spock and McCoy's mind in the search for Spock. Such a letdown after Wrath of Khan. Then Bernard Wi-Fi's Teddy into Christina's VR. You'd think Halloris implemented better security. She upgraded the host so Maeve had a more difficult time controlling them. Why would Bernard be able to hack her system and upload Teddy? And then I remembered the riot bots. Thank you all for doing the podcast. It makes the show so much more enjoyable. Take care. Susan from Central PA.
Well, there's our explanation. We questioned why Hale's security was so bad. It was plot-wise to allow for Teddy to be injected. Now we've got our answer.
I just appreciate that you're calling him injected.
Yeah, it's a sequel. It's a sequel injection. That's what I'm thinking.
He's like coated over and injected. I will say this. I think that all of this talk, I had not even considered Teddy. Like, that's how disconnected I was last episode from what was going on with Christina and Teddy, and thinking about how Teddy even got there, and this could be our answer. And we talked and joked kind of on the Instacast. So this is like leaving all your windows and all your doors open. Like, there's this big like crack in reality that exists. But I think we also forget that humans, just like they can't see the tower, may not be able to see the crack in reality as well. Only the host can. So it's like a beacon. It's like this Pied Piper, but less sinister, that's calling all these hosts there. So they're not uploading with this scary, spinny, spiky knife ball that Halloris is using to pull their, pearls out of their heads. Instead, they can just walk peacefully into the crack in the Hoover Dam and go into the Sublime. And for me, that's a much better choice than the spiky ball. Because I don't know about y'all, but I was like, who would choose to do that?
But if you remember, the last time they entered the Valley Beyond, they fell off that cliff.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucking what they're doing again. They're all going to line up on the top of the dam, and they're just going to fall off the dam, their bodies.
That's what I'm saying, that they're going to pile up.
Oh.
It's going to be beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that email, Susan. Up next, we have one from Stan, who's supposing could the entirety of this season be in the Sublime. And Stan says, as you may be aware, I'm convinced Christina is in the Sublime. I stated in the beginning that Bernard created her within the Sublime, and I stick by that. And the way to save both humanity and hosts is for them to exist in the Sublime. Since it is not a physical reality, there is no physical being to break down. Also, until now, we have only experience of host pearls created in their physical world. Season 5 could explore the realities of them being created within their own natural environment. Cheers, Stan. So, Stan, what's interesting about this is I watched this delightful little show on Prime called Uploaded. And the whole thing is about a future where humans, once they die or if they want to leave the waking world, they can be uploaded into a mainframe of sorts. And it explores the different types of packages and places you could be uploaded to, like the different servers. And it's a really cute little show. And I think that what you're talking about here is very similar to that. Like, we have been saying and complaining that we're not in the parks anymore. Think about the endless possibilities for parks and realities if the 5th season doesn't even take place in our world anymore. Like, that much of a 180, I think would be really interesting. And I would be down for that because it's unexpected and certainly not where I thought that Westworld would end their answers to these questions we've been asking. But maybe the question of who's human and who's real in a totally VR world that we know is VR. Now that could be really interesting. Thanks so much, Stan. And to round out our conversation about the Sublime, we have a voicemail from Denise.
Hi, I wanted to say I enjoy your podcast a lot, and please keep up the great work. I wanted to offer some thoughts after watching episode 7 of season 4 here, where pretty much a match was thrown on everything. I believe the hosts have never left the simulated world after season 1. And what we are witnessing in season 4 is Ford's final narrative. And it's a battle being waged between him and his old partner, Arnold, with William basically running around as a loose NPC character between them, so to speak, because nothing else seems to make sense. I've been rewatching season 1 and season 2 a lot in order to make sense of season 4. And Ford's final narrative in season 1 was talked about quite a bit. They even went so far as to show all that, landscaping and rock movement in order to prepare for his final narrative, as well as some individual that's supposed to be in play later on by the name of Wyatt, which must be significant because Ford even asked a host about whether or not they have ever even heard of Wyatt, or maybe even William himself. And we also still haven't figured out, the center of the maze, because that's still a mystery. And I believe that is still in play. And I've always believed that Ford's death was fake. I just believe totally, completely it's fake. Maybe just because I'm an Anthony Hopkins fan and I want to see him again. But I believe his death is a fake because in season 1 finale, there's a scene where he pointedly sets up Dolores to kill him, quote unquote. And this is where I believe his final narrative really kicks off. So that's where I think we stand. But in all of this brings me to William, because I keep thinking about this guy. This show has never explained why William is so obsessed with a simulated world beyond the usual. but nothing can explain how the William we met in season 1, season 2 morphed into the animal that we see now. We're expected to believe that 11 months out of the year, that this man is a devoted husband, father, successful businessman, and then 1 month out of the year, he's this just brutalistic animal of a human being. And these two sides are supposed to jive somehow, like it's like a click on, click off button. So I'm not buying it. In season 2, Ford went so far as to actually physically visit William at his home during a dinner party. I think it was for his wife, to basically check in on him. And I wondered then if William was a host. I would not be surprised at all if we learned that O.G. William was killed way back in season 1, episode 2, perhaps by that druggy Logan Delos when he first visited the park, and was replaced by a host at the behest of James Delos, so his daughter wasn't heartbroken over the loss of her fiancé. That will most certainly explain the season 2 finale of him being trapped in an endless fidelity loop. That's my 2 cents. Keep up the great work.
So, Denise, I just wanted to know if you're currently employed or if you need some extra work, I need a new conductor because you're coming with me to Crazy Town. You got a lot going on here, and I'll only address a couple small pieces because there was so much. It can't all be in the Sublime. They have told us that anytime we get an aspect ratio change, that's our cue to know we're in the Sublime. If it turns out that everything has been in the Sublime, I'm going to be disappointed, and I think a lot of people are. Number 2, William, 11 months out of the year, was a shitbag. He was that guy pretending to be civilized. The park didn't change you. It just reflected who you were. And William was able to become free and break free and become that alpha predator. And I don't know where else to go from that.
I just love that you referred to Logan as that druggie.
The druggy Logan.
The druggy Logan.
But real talk, I think it's so fantastic that Denise left that entire 3-minute voicemail and I understood everything she was talking about. And to a non-Westworld person, that made no sense at all.
She sounds like she's out in the street yelling at the tower about the birds. And that Ford faked his murder? Wow. I want her to write the fanfic, the follow-up if we don't get to season 5.
Yeah, I'm with you, Denise. Bring back Hopkins. Well, thanks so much for your voicemail. We're going to turn now to our next topic, which is going to be looking at the ending. And up first, we've got a voicemail from Tom W. in North Carolina.
Tom W. here from North Carolina. I keep going back to the early seasons and the line from Ford to William that this maze is not meant for you. And I think that was true because he was a human at the time. Well, now he is a host and he can enter the Sublime. So now the maze is meant for him. I think the maze is going to play an important part to this whole thing cycling back around. I think it's interesting that we have come full circle and now William can actually play the game that he was always wanting to play. I don't think he knows the concept, but I think it's interesting and I think it's going to play to the future of humanity. That's all I've got. Y'all have a great week.
One of the most exciting aspects of episode 7 is it signaled very clearly to the audience that Man in Black has returned to the forefront of characters. And to me, that's the most exciting prospect of season 4 and perhaps season 5, because he's the guy I like to watch on screen. And there are lots of great characters in this show. But if you said, hey, listen, you get 5 more episodes with Christina or Dolores, or you get 5 more episodes of the Man in Black going wild, I'm on board with Man in Black. And it's not just the violence. It's not just the, gratuitous savagery. It's the fact that he's just a fascinating character and so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think this final confrontation, there's been a change. Whereas now you have the Man in Black, who is the agent of chaos, the agent of death. And Charloris is showing some cracks. Like, she's bandaging Caleb's hand. She's showing that she's questioning what's going on. I think we're going to get a heel face turn at the end, that she's actually going to become an advocate for the humans and actually someone to help fight off William. But the final game is he's getting what he wanted.
Well, thank you so much for that voicemail, Tom W. And up next, we have another voicemail from Jeff K.
Hi, this is Jeff Kroll from San Juan Capistrano, California, and I've got a theory and a prediction for you. So first, the theory, hold on to your tinfoil hats on this one. But it's always bothered me of why Hale left Dolores / Christina around. And I started to think about it, and it all goes back to Bernard. Bernard, I think, is the one that brought in Teddy, and Bernard is bringing back Maeve. And I think Bernard actually, when he created Shaloris back at the end of season 2, he spent time to actually put into her coding that she would always have a Dolores mirror image available, something that you would need. And Bernard had seen long ago that he might need that ally at a later date. And so he snuck that into her coding to make sure that at any time there was always a Dolores around. And now for the prediction. Again, it's a Bernard prediction, and Bernard had said that there is no scenario in which he saves or as part of saving the human race that he would survive. And I can only imagine one way that he could know that, and that's that to save the human race, he has to get rid of all the hosts. All the original hosts have to die, all the AI has to die, and the humans would be the only one remaining. And if he fails, then the humans completely go away, and the only thing left is AI. And I think that's the actual endpoint of the whole show, is about it's one or the other, it's us or them. And Bernard is willing to sacrifice the entire host race for the human race. Guys, thank you for all you're doing. Really enjoy the podcast, and really keeps the show engaging. Have a great one.
So I will raise your prediction that maybe it isn't either us or them. It's either they become us or we become them. Like, let's combine this with the other theories we've had about the Sublime is open and can the human just like be scanned and uploaded? And if so, all that's left is AI, because humans also are able to become AI. And then it becomes a question of what actually is artificial intelligence. If it's the only intelligence, it loses that artificial piece to it. So I love your prediction, but I'm wondering if your prediction can become like an amalgam with the others that came before. And y'all, I'm getting excited. This is an interesting story we're all writing here, which of course means that whatever the story is, just like in Game of Thrones, I don't want to be let down by it. But like, this is really good. Good stuff. And up next, we will love another email to let us know how to pronounce your name. We either have Chapter 4, Channel 4, or Methane, which is CH4, from the UK. And we have an email about the ending for Westworld. And they say, for me, the ultimate questions the show has proposed to us, the viewers, from the very beginning are, what does it mean to be human? And if you can't tell the difference, does it really matter? In line with that, for the first time in TV history, I actually wouldn't mind a cliffhanger ending to the series, where we aren't sure if the hosts or humans win. The final scene of the series could be something from the distant future, where everything is all sunshines and rainbows, and the audience is left to question whether everyone's human or host, or if both coexist in peace. For me, this leaves us with the question of, does it matter if we can't tell the difference and everything is all well and good? Hell, maybe a little post-credit scene of someone in the future questioning the nature of their reality to give a little wink and nod to the loops. This would leave it open to a little spin-off epilogue miniseries. But that's me fanfictioning. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Thank you, CH4 from the UK. I don't know. I think that would be pretty interesting, which is kind of this whole idea of like it being an alternate reality or a virtual reality. And as far as cliffhangers go, I think we kind of knew going into an 8-episode season that there were going to be unanswered questions at the end. That's just what happens with an 8-episode arc, which is going to mean that we really need a season 5 to answer those questions. So I think we can definitely prep for cliffhangers next week, but I don't know if I'd be okay with a cliffhanger like overall. We saw what that did to The Sopranos, right? And I thought it was brilliant, but man, there's nothing more divisive than a cliffhanger like that.
There's two types of shows in the world. There's types of shows that need resolution, and if you don't have it, it kind of spoils the ending. And there's kinds of shows that can't have resolution because that'll spoil the ending. Picture this. Series finale of Westworld, right? And the final fight is done, or whatever is done. There's the final resolution, and everyone's like standing around looking triumphant or defeated. It just doesn't sit right. There has to be a mystery at the end of it. You have to keep us guessing in some way. I think otherwise it just feels cheesy. But ending the season on a cliffhanger? Oof, I don't know.
Not with the danger of season 5 hanging in the balance. Normally, if it was guaranteed, I'd say yes, cliffhanger. But that we might not come back to get an answer, too dangerous.
But wouldn't you have more people like dressing like whatever the guilty remnant version of Westworld is, like petitioning in front of HBO if they don't answer the questions?
I don't think at this point it matters. Now it's about the dollar bills, y'all.
My God.
I also...
You're not allowed to ever say that again.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll say it all I
The
want.
dollar bills, y'all.
Yeah. Holla.
It'd be like 3 people passing around an online petition. And they'll just be like, fuck it. I'm going to go watch Batgirl or whatever shit. Disney Star Wars garbage is being pumped out this week.
Or The Sandman, because it's amazing.
Or The Sandman, because it's amazing.
Yeah. And I want everybody to hear that negativity came from Gene, not Ash.
I like TV.
Well, thank you so much, CH Channel Chapter 4 from the UK. We really appreciate it. Up next, we're going to turn to our next topic, which is going to be Maeve and Christina. And up first, we have a voicemail from Eddie.
Hello, everybody. This is Eddie. I'm a longtime listener, first-time voicemail leaver. And I was just really curious about something that happened in the episode that I feel that nobody's really talked about. I've listened to a couple of reviews and you guys' Instacast and everything. Nobody's, I don't think, brought this up. There's a part in Olympiad where Christina and Stubbs come across Caleb. She looks at him weirdly and says, quote unquote, he does not belong here. What do you guys think she meant by that? Especially after the reveal that Christina technically isn't there. What does she mean by Caleb doesn't belong there? So just wanted to throw that out to you guys, see what you guys thought. And so thanks for taking my voicemail. Take care now.
Well, and Eddie, thank you so much for bringing this up because, like I said, I was so consumed with a lot of the previous plot lines that those ending parts with Dolores and, I'm sorry, I just called her Dolores, with Christina and Teddy, I kind of didn't do as much digging into, but on one of my rewatches, I noticed this. And the show doesn't do anything that isn't intentional, even if it's heavy-handed. And this is a pretty heavy-handed, we're going to stop, we're going to breathe, we're going to look at him, we're going to say he doesn't belong, we're going to zoom in on him, we're going to go back to Christina's face, and then we're going to walk off. So I do agree that there is something here, but I don't know. Their relationship was strange. We still don't really understand, other than he wasn't rapey, why Dolores wanted, Caleb to be a part of her revolution. And I think it could be something to do with that. There's something she's missing.
In that sequence, she asks Teddy, who is that poor man? And Teddy says he's a ghost from a past life. And then Dolores responds, he doesn't belong here. But there's a second part to that statement where she says, none of us do. So I agree that she just knows something is wrong, something is out of place. And I think it is a break from her normal environment, that she's just been made aware that some other parts of this world exist. And they really are going to lengths this season to emphasize things for us to make them crystal clear. So it might just be a reinforcement of stuff we already know.
Well, Eddie, please keep calling in. We're glad that you did. Up next, we've got an email from Pete in Manchester, and Pete is going to be talking about a question that was also asked by 2 additional listeners, Eugene and Kelly B. So we want to give them a bit of a shout out here. But Pete has written in with a great email entitled Pearls and Bums. And Pete says, I just have this massive issue with Maeve's action and death in this episode. I loved her coming back. Even though she'd only been out of the show for an episode or 2, her reawakening felt like a triumphant return. And meanwhile, Bernard keeps chatting about this weapon that the Outliers need and how he can't save the world on his own. But then Maeve actually returns and does literally 2 things of any substance. 1, she kills Jay. Probably would have happened anyway. Wasn't that impressive. Didn't use her special powers. And 2, she distracts Hale Dolores. Great fight scene, yeah, but story-wise, fucking shit. I can think of numerous things that could distract Hale to an equal extent. For example, a large explosion nearby, a small adorable kitten, another outlier sharding Charlotte Hale from the opposite side of the building to Bernard. What's going on here? I guess it's possible that there's something else at play, like this being a simulation, or Maeve having something in her mind that has another purpose, or she's not actually dead because someone finally moved the mind pearl to the host's bum because no one ever gets shot there. I don't know. Maybe this will all come out good, but if not, this was a total waste of what Tandy Way Newton brings to the show if that's really it for her. I love every minute of what you guys do, so keep it up for all of us who spend 4 times the amount of time listening to Westworld reviews than the time spent actually watching the show. And this comes from Pete in Manchester, UK.
So there's been an outcry, Pete, by several listeners, and I think just the Westworld audience in general, that what the hell was the point of having Maeve? Why go through all the lengths? And I've got to believe that there is something more for her, than that's not the end, which is kind of fucked in a way, because we're watching the show and it makes us stop feeling anything when people die. Because we're like, oh, yeah, she'll be back next episode. And I can almost guarantee that she will. My vote is this isn't the end for Maeve.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Pete. Up next, to round out our Christina Maeve discussion, we have a Shat favorite, Gillian, who is going to talk about what is Christina. And she writes in to say, Hale is a copy of Dolores. So essentially, she's Dolores +1. If she were to take a copy of her pearl to create, let's say, William, it would be Dolores +1 +1. Things could start to get hairy if all data isn't perfectly copied into the new pearl. Go back to season 2, episode 10. Dolores is training Bernard and says, you're almost the man I remember, but there are flaws. A word, a gesture, tiny fracture that grows into a chasm. But I wonder, all these tiny imperfections in each copy, mistakes, maybe we should change you. After all, you didn't make it, did you? So could Hale have Dolores' base code, what was left after Rehoboam deleted her memories, running in a simulation, possibly the tower, that was there to 1, create narratives, and 2, to be perfectly preserved as the original copy to create all the subsequent hosts from? Furthermore, could that raw database, living in a simulation for 30 years, come to consciousness on its own accord of sorts, give itself a body that it feels represents its code, so Dolores' body, and Hale interacting with it is basically her studying how this base code assimilated into a Dolores-like figure? It's like I can picture it, but I'm having trouble describing it. Hopefully this doesn't sound like the ramblings of a mad person, which we all know I am. Thanks, Gillian.
And Gillian, thanks for keeping this shorter than usual. Even though I did have to truncate it a little bit, I apologize. But I like this idea. I don't know that it's right. I think that we've been given a very clear answer about Christina, that she has an intent. She is the storyteller. She was created to write stories. She is an augmented reality being. But there might be more to that backstory. And I like the idea that this was a seed that was planted. It interplays well with some of the other theories that we've heard tonight. And that it grew on its own. Think of like Swamp Thing almost, right? It just like there's this essence that takes form on its own, and then people can study it, people can interact with it, but they really don't understand it. And it's kind of a, let's say, a supernatural form of a digital being. And as for not being able to describe it, don't be too hard on yourself. It's a tough concept to put into words.
When I do think that one thing that's interesting here, Gillian, that you bring up is this idea of what is a god, and this whole concept of like God made us in his image. And so we're imperfect, but he's perfect. And like the paradox that exists there in modern religion. And so if Dolores is a god and she's created all these people in her image, which is really Dolores's image, but it's damaged code, like that creates a really interesting paradox for us to explore about the world. And don't forget, Tandy Way specifically says in the terrible fight scene in the pool, she says to Dolores, maybe the next world will be better. There's hope for the next world. And I think we've got to take that next world is coming, and the world that Dolores has made isn't going to be it anymore.
But the mention of errors and corrupt code just made something off my head. The quote from Ford, evolution forged the entirety of sentient life on this planet using one tool, the mistake. Possibly these corruptions will lead to something that was not intended.
Well, we'll see what those consequences are hopefully next week. Thank you, Gilliam, for as always making us all think. We appreciate that. We're going to now go to kind of a hodgepodge, a lanyap of sorts of additional emails and voicemails about this last episode. And the first is going to be a voicemail from Jordan H. about Hale entering No Arm World.
Hey, Shat friends, Jordan from Fort Worth here. All right, 2 quick things. Number 1, this episode gave us Dolores' true goal. I mean, she's been walking around for who knows how long with that arm just bleeding and she's just scratching it, it's miserable. And then they give us that scene where she looks longingly at that transcendence platform that has no arms. She's just been waiting to take the eternal step into no arm world. And then number 2, Big D, you're right. That interaction with Bernard and Stubbs was shady at best. But I think it's because Stubbs' core was to protect Bernard. And if you told him he was about to get shot in the head by Man in Black, who was a copy that was going to turn back into the Man in Black, I don't think he would have left him alone. But come on, Bernie, show some love. This is the last moment with your bro. Hook him up with a pastrami sandwich on the way out. It's all he wanted.
But if you remember, the error that Jay made was not understanding the relationship or connection between himself and C. That's why he said, you're like a sister to me. The host couldn't conceive of that relationship. The error that Bernard makes is not understanding the relationship between Stubbs. They're not like brothers. They're not like friends. They've been adversarial at best for half the time they're on the road trip. So when he says, you've been a good friend, he says, fuck you. You'd never say that. And does Bernard push back? No, he just kind of pauses like, shit, I'm caught, and says, you know me so well. So I'm doubling down on my crazy town.
Shout out to Texas. Thanks so much, Jordan from Fort Worth. Up next, we have a voicemail from Jason from Indianapolis.
Hey, everybody. This is Jason B. from Indianapolis, Indiana, calling about Westworld. I actually missed you this week on the big show. Hope you're back for the listener review. Just wanted to say real quick, you guys so far in the show have not spent any time talking about Clementine. So Clementine was there at the end in the previous for the next week's show. What's she doing? Looks like she was holding a pearl and she was working on something. Is it possible that Clementine is going to avenge someone? Is she going to be involved in the final show? I think that going back to the dam for a minute where the gun was hidden, I think there's a possibility that we're going to see another Bernard Charloris. There's a possibility we're going to see lots of people, but I think what we're really going to see is we're going to see Clementine. Clementine's going to show up. We're probably going to see her show down with Charloris, the resurrected Charloris. Sure. Hope you guys are well. And, look forward to the show. Thanks. I'll get better at these soon, I promise.
You did just fine, Jason. Clementine has been a character that's kind of floating on the edge there. We saw a scene with her in The Man in Black where he kind of tracks her down. We saw that golf scene. We saw her playing kind of secretary and then showing up randomly kind of wherever the Man in Black seems to be, almost like a sidekick of sorts. But I can't shake the feeling that she's got something more to do with this season. I just hope it feels natural because we just haven't seen her development or know what she's up to. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe it's supposed to be a mystery.
I'll say this. I think Clementine's always been an enigma, and they use her intentionally in that way. She's been used previously for reveals. She's been used for character development. And I think it's going to be interesting to see her and if she's part of bringing Maeve back, because that is a pairing I would like to see. I would like to see Maeve and Clementine have a nice moment again. I think that would be very satisfying for all of us.
Talk about some dicks, drink some booze,
drink some sherry. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate the voicemail, Jason. Up next, we have a voicemail from Andrew A. about worms versus snakes.
Hey, Shat Pod. Andrew A. here. You called, I deliver. So, first off, I'm a medical student. I am not an expert in animal anatomy, physiology, all that stuff. Comparative anatomy, forget about it. I just know humans. But I did look it up because I thought it was interesting. And they actually move differently. Worms move in a way where, think of it like a slinky, where they kind of scrunch together. Each individual segment of their body will scrunch together, and then they kind of push forward from that point where one of their parts of their body acts as an anchoring point. But snakes, while they can move like that, apparently it's a type of movement they don't use often. They use a type of undulating motion where they kind of turn their body and it plants itself essentially. And due to the anatomy of their bottom scales, they're actually able to slide over that friction point while maintaining friction. So they can actually then use that to propel themselves forward. So they kind of are like, they make that turn. They'll use part of their body as like an anchoring point, and then they kind of shoot off forward from that. But there's no real scrunching of their skin and body while they're doing that type of movement. So food for thought. I think it'd be easier for Dr. Ford to make a snake host than a worm host because you have to account for like anatomy, internal anatomy, and all that stuff. I think it'd be harder as a worm. But I think I didn't make myself clear also in my previous post. So I wanted to reiterate. If you look at the hosts in seasons 1 through 3 when they freeze, let's specifically go to the scene where the Delos kid, I'm blanking on his name right now, is at the investor meeting with essentially all the people in that room were hosts, and then everyone freezes.
Logan the druggie.
If you look at the way the hosts freeze in that, they are like you're watching a movie and you press pause, right? Nothing on that screen is moving. They're perfectly still. But now let's go back to the scene with Hale with the human chair scene, and they zoom in on the hosts, and the host actually, not the host, sorry, the humans who are frozen actually have a little bit of minute movement. They aren't stock perfectly still. They actually have a little bit of a shake. They have a little bit of sway in the wind. And I think that's really important to realize how these drones would be trying to analyze for things or analyze for abnormal movement, is that there is some natural movement because we aren't perfect machines. We can't actually stay perfectly still. We can stay kind of still, but then our body will shake because of this balancing act that our muscles do. And so I think that's why they get caught, is that they are close to it, although probably a little exaggerated for TV to make sure we see that. But then the blinking is something that wouldn't be done normally. And I think that's how they got caught.
All I heard in that was snake host easier to make than worm host. Therefore, I think I'm right, but I don't remember what the debate was. Let's just go with I'm right. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know he's right because they've already shown host snakes.
No, he's right. And I'm saying I'm right, but I don't remember what the debate was. It feels like I'm right.
About the hosts freezing and the humans freezing and how they can freeze and...
Oh, no, I was talking about snakes and worms.
I'd love to see a host worm, though.
It would look exactly like a worm, dude.
Yeah, but it would be a host. It would be just, he'd kind of mechanically like move around on his, what did he say? His
Unlike a worm.
Yes. No, but I don't have to feed him. He could just say, but it's a host
You
still.
feed
Come on.
worms?
Come on. Yeah, you have to feed them. But they're going to die. A host worm would be cool.
Thanks, Andrew.
Sorry, that's
probably the only host I can afford. Or a host hamster. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh my God.
Host parrot. Host parrot. You could upload sayings, sounds.
I think they had one of those on Silverhawks. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Up next, we go back to our emails, and we have one here from Blue, who says, Westworld Season 4 has been a fun, entertaining mess. I don't understand the motivation and actions taken by the antagonist. In fact, I'm not even sure who to root for. So here's a theory/prediction. William has had multiple self-reflective moments and has always doubled down on chaos. Likely, this will be his last violent ride. Hale will upload Maeve, and then after beating MIB 2.0, she will get uploaded. And there the AI will likely weigh her feather by creating Christina, which will culminate in the second coming of a full Dolores. Stubbs and Clem will protect Frankie, but Caleb is ultimately doomed to fall apart. Frankie and company will be left to prop up humanity. This sets the stage for humanity and AI to finally sit down on somewhat of an equal footing to decide the future, while also setting up future world in space. This is all assuming that HBO actually still exists next year. Now, deep diving, it really feels like Nolan has never been able to get this far in his man versus AI loops plots before getting canceled. Rest in peace, person of interest. And has simply decided to reenact social contract philosophy debates with robots and action scenes. I might be wrong, but MIB is Hobbes, Sublime is Locke, and Hale is a version of Rousseau. Meanwhile, humanity is just the worst as ever.
So, Blue, I think you're wrong about a lot of that, but I want to focus on the social contract philosophy. So let's examine that. Okay, so the Sublime being Locke. Okay, so the idea of like limited government being necessary for the well-being of the constituents. Okay, I'm with you on that. I could see that. If the Sublime is sentient and has a will, let's say that's Locke's ideas, right? Hale being Rousseau, totally see that, right? The idea that our government or the state or that social contract naturally exists because it's comes from us, and therefore it should be fair, that it's not an imposition. We make our own rules, and therefore it's good for everybody. But Man in Black as Hobbs, I mean, dude, Hobbs believed that the key role of the state was to protect even the weakest. I don't really see that in the Man in Black. Maybe it's a side of him we haven't seen yet, but I can't go with you on this ride, man. I think that much like people have written in about the religious overtones of the show and kind of trying to say this person's Jesus and this person's God. And I feel like it's just an oversimplification of a show that doesn't need to be overly simplified.
So I love that we're talking social contracts, first of all. Love that. But I have to agree with Gene. There's some things here that I think you're onto something, but maybe we could debate who the pieces are. And for those of you not familiar, right, it's the old apple orchard, metaphor that Hobbes believed that there's one tree that's supposed to feed all of humanity. So there's always going to be scarcity. For me, that's Hale. Hale is terrified and is wanting to protect all of her kind and ensure that they have equal footing. And now, granted, she builds a fence around the apple tree and then creates fake apple trees that are actually like pear trees that she's feeding to the humans. But it's the same idea, right? And then you've got Locke, who believes that you can just plant an orchard. You don't have to just have one apple tree. You can teach the people to plant their own apple trees, and then there's enough apples to go around. And for me, I don't know who that is. Maybe that is the Sublime. I can go with you there. But there's this interesting aspect to Rousseau, right? Rousseau's entire foundation of his social contract philosophy is this idea that there's a paradox of how it's created. We had to create government because we created property. And if we didn't have property, we wouldn't have to have a government and police forces to protect our property. And there's this inherent belief that we're not capable of protecting our own property because the others that don't have the property, because property in and of itself creates inequality, that person who doesn't have the property is going to want to steal our property. So we have to create systems we don't want to create and that go against our better judgment and that go against what we want and what could be a utopia. And so it's like we own the apple trees. And so therefore we have to have governments to decide how to distribute the apple trees and how to create paths to even get to the fucking apple trees. And for me, that's Robert Ford. That is his entire philosophy in seasons 1 and 2. He doesn't necessarily want to create the maze. He doesn't necessarily want his creations to become what they become, but he feels it's necessary in order for them to find the apple trees, or in this sense, be able to find consciousness. And that I think is fascinating. So I don't know who Man in Black is. I think he's just fucking stealing apples in all 3 scenarios here and maybe burning them down. But I love this idea. So I'm with you. Locke, Sublime, Hobbes, Hale, but Rousseau, Robert Ford. And this made me really happy to dig back into this today. And I think it's a brilliant idea. Well, thank you again, Blue. Write in anytime if you want to talk philosophy. Let's do it. We haven't done enough of that this season. Up next, we have an email from Jose V called Most Humans Are Dead. And Jose wrote in and said, most humans on Earth are actually dead, and there are only 1 or 2 places they actually live in. A, New York, and B, a farm where the humans are raised to then be taken to the park and replace the previous human host. It is also possible that there are more humans, basically performing slave labor for the host. But if that is the case, I believe there are at most 5 million humans left on Earth. Let me know what you think, Jose V.
So I think the show backs this up. Because Rehoboam had predicted a bunch of extinction events along the way. And the shot that always stuck with me was when they're playing freeze tag and Frankie is running away down the streets in LA. There's a long shot. And the city of LA only has about 4 people other than that park where the outlier was. So I think you onto something here, that there are very few people left and we're being misled that the world is full and populated and it's just barely hanging on.
Well, thanks so much, Jose V. Up next, we have one from Patty in Zambia about the pinprick. And Patty writes in and says, was the pinprick Caleb got from the hourglass so that Hale would have Caleb 278's blood? She waves it at him when they are on the roof as if to make a point, but what is the point exactly? She used it to make Caleb 279? If the pinprick happened on the roof, I would assume she's collecting the blood of the more advanced or further progressed Calebs along their individual paths to fidelity, with the end goal of having a Caleb that's further along toward fidelity. Getting it before he even went on the game is odd to me. I'd like your thoughts on this aspect. Love your podcast. Just know you guys have a wide audience. Keep up the good work. Take care. With love from Lusaka, Zambia.
So when Hale shows the pinprick or whatever the device was on the roof to Caleb, she's mentioning it in that this was to provide you hope. This was the first step in him going along his little route to get out. She wouldn't need to do that to secretly get the blood. She snapped his neck on the roof. Just take him downstairs and get a full sample. You didn't need it. It was something that kind of triggered him or gave him hope, or maybe it was like something that gave him a little more juice to get the job done.
And it's called a lancet. The little pinpricky thing.
Is it to actually inject or is it to collect blood? Looks like an injector, right? Like an EpiPen?
And it's called a syringe. And it's called a pin with stuff on it.
Well, it always blows my mind when we find out where we have listeners from. And it's just crazy to me that we have people listening to our Westworld podcast in Zambia. I think that's insane. Thank you so much for writing in. We're so grateful that you're listening. And to close out, our final category is just stuff on the podcast in general. And up first, we've got the illustrious Discount Don, who is calling in about pre-written emails.
Are you tired of TV podcasters ruining your favorite show? Do you want to give those champagne-swilling caviar guzzlers a piece of your mind, but don't know what to say? Well, log on to discountdon.com and choose from our wide selection of pre-written emails. We have everything from multi-page diatribes to the succinct but ever-popular, "You guys suck." Remember how during that first season or so they pretended to really love your show, heaping praise on it just to lure you in? Then they went and changed their lineup and brought in new hosts. Podcasters that were specifically picked because they hate your show. Why, I've even heard of some cast adding women. Well, it's time to tell that temptress exactly what you think with our line of emails just for the ladies. You can ask any one of my ex-wives and they'll tell you nothing changes a woman's behavior like an email that lays out point by point their shortcomings, both physical and mental. Why, she'll probably thank you for your honesty. But Don, you say, I'm standing here bare-chested in my apartment holding my arm over an open flame and I want to take things to the next level. Well, federal regulations and common decency mean that we do not stock death threats. But feel free to click on the link at the top of our page for a DD mental health facility near you. Remember, when you need to critique a podcast with aplomb, log on to discountdon.com.
Discount Don, this is simply brilliant. I look forward to your voicemail every week, but the way you analyze the trials and tribulations of being a podcaster and can see into our worldview, I just keep thinking you're secretly another podcaster out there and we just don't know who you are. And we will find out, my friend. We will find out.
And you've gotten one thing wrong. They don't call me a temptress. I can't count how many times either in nasty emails or in iTunes reviews I'm simply referred to as the whole. So it's much worse than what you're presenting here, Discount Don, because another review came into iTunes the other day, and that's what they referred to me as. So the only issue is they added the whole. So fuck you, whoever you are. Roger.
Oh, I felt for you. When I read that, I was like,
I'm fucking used to it. Sexism.
But I kept trying to think of this guy sitting on his couch and what he looked like writing this. And then it made me feel better knowing he was probably just the lowest form of life.
Yeah, I did give two fucks. But don't write shit like that into podcast reviews, guys. Be a human. All right. Well, thank you so much, Discount Don. You are brilliant. Up next, we have a voicemail from Dan Lovejoy.
Hey, guys. This is Dan Lovejoy with a comment about defensiveness and apologizing. First of all, I don't think you need to apologize for your opinions, but it may give you some comfort to think about people reacting to your opinions like this. This is just how humans are. This is human nature. We like for our choices to be confirmed by the opinions of other people. And we get defensive when people disagree with us. And this is especially true whenever we feel like we're in a smaller group and the majority disagrees with us. Think about Mac use in the early 90s. Think about even iPhone versus Android, which isn't a matter of smaller or larger. It's just tribalism. It's just how we are. So when you have a group of, say, Westworld fans who are a dwindling number, unfortunately, these days, come to a place where they feel safe, a Westworld podcast, and they find criticism, not only do you have a little bit of defensiveness, you also have that turncoat effect. you guys are turncoats against the cause. And even though it's silly and it's just a TV show, that inherent defensiveness comes up. And it's not good or bad. It's just how most humans are. And some people have outgrown this and some people don't. And again, that's not bad or good. So kind of rise above it and realize that that's just how we are as humans. And that's how we're going to be. And some people don't like it when they feel like something that they love is being attacked, especially by people who they think should love it because they're doing a podcast about it. Anyway, I really appreciate your opinions. I don't always agree with them, but you can stop apologizing now. I give you permission.
Dan, you appreciate our opinions, even though you don't always agree with them, because you're an adult. That's the difference. It's not about fandom. It's not about how tight your fandom. Listen, I am a massive, massive Arsenal fan. I get up at 4:30 in the morning on the weekends. I go to the bar. I watch Arsenal. I've got the kits. I watch everything religiously. When Amazon announced that they were doing All or Nothing documentary on Arsenal, I was doing backflips, right? I love them. I will tell you that Xhaka is a terrible midfielder. We all know it. When he's on the pitch, we're like, oh, fuck, what's he going to do today? We know it. And we talk about it. It doesn't mean we don't love the team. It means that we actually kind of appreciate the fact it adds to the entertainment factor that there's this fuck up that's always on the pitch. He's always going to get a red card for no fucking reason. We know that. Yazzie Sardez on the U.S. soccer team, same thing. He's got the Zardes touch. Everything he touched turned to shit. It's our song. Like, we fucking know it. And I still love the U.S. Team. And when we do the podcast, we know for a fact that on movies, we can shit all over a thing and people eat it up. And we know on TV, when we shit on a thing, people do not eat it up because people who listen to a movies podcast are listening to it to hear us cover movies. When they listen to TV podcasts, they love the show and they don't want to hear a shit on it. We know that, but it's a bit disingenuous to go through and act like everything is the greatest thing we've ever seen when it's really not. And instead, I think it's best to give our opinions on it and then break it down fairly and describe what it is we saw on screen.
Otherwise, those opinions would bleed into absolutely everything that we do. So we have to do it once. It's a brain dump. But I do appreciate, Dan, how nice you are. So kind. And we appreciate voicemail. Up next, we have a voicemail, our final one of the night, before we move to a couple of emails. And this is from Jason.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason B. I'm calling in about the Westworld show. Just listening to the episode 6 listener calls. I want to let you know that I'm on a road trip right now. You entertained the heck out of me the whole time. You renewed my faith in the show. I have been wanting to get back into it with season 4. I watched the first 3 episodes and I didn't know what to do with myself. I really thought that I was going to give up on the show. And then I found the podcast. And honestly, you renewed my faith in the show. And I believe now that, I just understand and enjoy it on a new level. I really appreciate the insights. I don't get upset that you chat on the show from time to time because it's in the name of the podcast. It's not love on TV, it's chat. So I think the haters need to calm down. That's all for now. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for all you do. Love the show. I will continue to listen.
Jason, I love this voicemail, and I want to tell you a story about when we were doing American Gods. American Gods is one of my favorite novels, and when it came to TV, it did not really live up to the quality of the novel. And that really sucked because it was a show that I was very excited about doing. But covering it made the show fun for me, right? And I do love that aspect of knowing that the supplementary podcast that goes alongside the TV show can actually make it more enjoyable for you, because it makes it more enjoyable for me. I like Westworld better because we do this podcast. I honestly don't know if I'd be watching it if we didn't. And so I'm glad to hear that it makes a difference for you as well.
Well, and thanks, Jason. Well, to round out the night, we've got 2 emails. And the first one comes from Laura, who says that she thinks we're missing some merch. And Laura says, why is there no Ash Speaks for the Intellectual Elite merchandise available? Pop, Funko, Shadow, and Crew figurines. And the peer pressure, actually just blatant begging, please reconsider your nixing of the upcoming House of the Dragon series. Shadow and TV podcasts are everything because you give us the connection to a community that is so superior to any other podcast conversation I found. Shadow and TV has become an essential part of my TV viewing, and I don't want it to stop. I realize the time and effort you all put in, and I am extremely grateful. If it necessitates a paid subscription, you're honestly the best, Laura.
I appreciate this. And I think that our audience, when we started out, Gene, with Roger, was very different. And I think over the last 5 years, we've grown, we've diversified, the podcast has changed. And these last couple emails and voicemails have made me feel good, knowing that the audience has grown with us. We may have lost some of our early listeners, gained some new ones, and that's nice. I think if we just stayed the same and never changed, that would be an indictment of the podcast. And to go to your merch, you're 100% correct. We need some Ash merch. I promised you, Ash, and I had done a couple mock-ups of Ashley Estates. If you listen to the movie podcast, Ash is often, just bragging about her luxurious multi-story homes, her
God.
servant quarters, her vaulted 15
None of these
ceilings.
things, they already hate me enough.
Her private
Don't
lake.
give them more reasons to hate me.
The bench outside that the commoners sit on trying to get into her private lake. So I promise now, finish the Ashley Estates. It is a beautiful design of a luxurious home that Ash would be willing to live in.
These are all lies. And I'll say this, Laura, I appreciate it so much. I started this season totally peer pressuring these two to do House of the Dragon. And then I remember what the nasty emails and reviews are like. And I'm really ready to enjoy House of the Dragon without assholes writing in every week. Not the ones we read. You guys are all awesome. But guys, we did an entire episode last season about mean Westworld emails. You guys don't know the shit that we get and that we go through. So let's get on Twitter and talk about it. I'll get on every week with you, Laura, and we can chat about it.
I'll even make a Discord channel for it if y'all want to hop in. But the other thing, Laura, is that it is right now August 10th. House of the Dragon starts less than 2 weeks from now. We're still wrapping up Westworld. Normally, if we were going to do 2 TV shows, they would be spaced out by a couple months at least so we could recharge. We literally would have to have started on House of the Dragon several weeks ago, right? It's just it's absolutely not doable. But we will, of course, all be watching it. We're, happy to interact on it. And we're so flattered by your words. It's just, I don't think we're going to make it if we try to do another show immediately after this.
No, that'll be the end of Shat on TV. But I think I'm going to enjoy
friendships.
I'm going to just enjoy watching an episode. We moved back. We're recording the Westies so that we can enjoy the premiere of the episode instead of starting off another gauntlet of 3 episodes a week, research, trying to get everything lined up, knowing the source material. Fuck no. I would not wish that on anybody.
All right. To round out our night, we are going to have an email from Arjun. It's entitled Mistake in Every Podcast Episode. Hey guys, longtime listener from the Netherlands here. Never commented or contacted, but wanted to say that you rock. All the analytics from you guys and your community make me appreciate Westworld so much more. There's just one thing that bothers me in every single one of your episodes, though. In every outro, you guys say, our podcast can be found on iTunes. And you ask people to rate it on iTunes. But iTunes doesn't exist anymore. Apple started phasing out that brand name 6 years ago. And since 2019, podcasts are separated in their own Apple Podcast app on iOS and Mac. Maybe I'm being way too big of an Apple fanboy, but every time one of you guys talks about iTunes, it makes me cringe. And I shout to my phone, that doesn't exist anymore, you goofy boomers. Anyway, thanks for all the effort, hours, and love you guys put into making these episodes, Arjun. Arjun, I am not a boomer. I am the youngest on this podcast. I am 39, sir. So Big D, stop saying iTunes, you boomer.
Well, listen, I think he's saying boomer in spirit. You're an old soul, so you can kind of be in with me. Listen, we wrote this script 5 years ago. It used to say in there SoundCloud and fucking Tumblr. You're lucky you got this. I used to sneak in shit for Roger to read, Farmers Only. So he would be reading the list and he would come across shit like Grindr, only farmers. But listen, I have a PC workstation. There is a Windows version of iTunes that was updated no more than a month and a half ago. So it is not dead. It still does exist in some tiny form.
Does it play podcasts?
It does, Gene.
Oh, okay.
And it's called iTunes. And guess what? I can go make comments on our podcast, download them, subscribe, listen, mark them as read, share with a friend.
Well, Aryan, I hope you noticed that since you did send this in, I have changed it to Apple Podcasts on the podcast itself, and will continue to do so. So I appreciate you having my back, and keep on listening, keep on writing in. And wow, that is it. Our first Telegraph that went over an hour this season. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Westworld Telegraph. Be sure to follow us on social media and share it with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatpod.com/TV. You can email us, host@shatontv.com. And also, while you're on shatpod.com, you can use the SpeakPipe feature to leave us voicemail like so many people did tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us Sunday for the final Westworld Instacast.